Now let's have a look at question number 10. 10 part A. Differentiate between centripetal force and centrifugal force. The second part of part A. What is the position of the center of gravity of a parallelogram and a solid cone? So first of all, we have to distinguish between centripetal force and centrifugal force. Now, centripetal force is always radially inward. That means it is along the radius of the circle which the object is tracing. So it is along the radius towards the center of the circle. Whereas the centrifugal force is radially outward. That means it is along the radius away from the center of the circle. Then centripetal force, as you all know, is a real force, whereas centrifugal force is not a real force. It comes into play only for an object which is the part of the circular motion. So it is called a pseudo force. Now the second subpart was the position of center of gravity of a parallelogram. Now for a parallelogram, wherever the diagonals of the parallelogram meet will be the center of gravity. So the center of gravity CG will be where the diagonals meet. Whereas for a solid cone, it's going to be more towards the base of the cone. That is common sense, as there is more mass towards the base of the cone rather than the vertex of the cone. However, if the height of the cone is h, in that case the center of gravity is at a height h by 4 above the base of the cone. So basically the CG is at a height h by 4 above the base of the cone. Now question 10 part B. The diagram shows a circuit containing a coil wound on a thin hollow cardboard. So there's a cardboard out here and a coil is wound around it. Name the polarity acquired by each face of the solenoid. Mention two methods to increase the strength of the magnetic field inside the coil. So as you all can see, there's a battery out here and there's a rheostat out here and there's an ammeter out here. Obviously, since the positive terminal of the battery is out here, the current is going to start from the positive terminal and then go behind the cardboard tube and then move down in front of the cardboard tube. So the path of the current is what I'm marking out here, and finally the current returns to the negative terminal of the cell. Now, in order to find out the polarity of the solenoid, what we need is something known as right hand grip rule, which states that you imagine to hold the solenoid in your right hand with fingers pointing the direction of current. In such a case, your outstretched thumb will point to the north pole. In such a case, if I apply right hand grip rule to this solenoid, then the outstretched thumb will then point towards B. So B becomes the north pole, and obviously if B is the north pole, end A of the solenoid will become the south pole. Also, the question is asking, mention two methods to increase the strength of the magnetic field inside the coil. Now, two simple methods of increasing the magnetic field inside the coil is number one, to increase the strength of current. So, we can increase the strength of current by decreasing the resistance of the rheostat out here. And another way of increasing the strength of the magnetic field is placing a soft iron core inside this cardboard tube. So place a soft iron cylinder inside the cardboard tube. This will ensure that the strength of the magnetic field gets enhanced, as soft iron gets very easily magnetized. Now 10 part C. A crowbar of length 150 centimeter has its fulcrum at a distance of 25 centimeters from the load. Calculate the mechanical advantage of the crowbar. By the way, a crowbar, I'm assuming everybody knows, is a lever of class 1. And if it is a lever of class 1, then fulcrum is in the middle. When I say middle, I don't mean the midpoint, but somewhere between the load and the effort. So if I have to draw the schematic diagram of a crowbar, then the fulcrum will be shown somewhere in the middle, and load will be on one side and the effort will be on the other side. Suppose the fulcrum is out here. Now the whole crowbar is of length 150 centimeters and has its fulcrum at a distance of 25 centimeters from the load. So from here to here is 25 centimeters. We don't know how much is the effort arm. So effort arm is 150 minus 25, which is 125 centimeters. Now we'll calculate the MA using the formula effort arm upon load arm. Effort arm is 125 and load arm is 25. So MA will be 5. So in that case, it becomes a force multiplier as its MA is more than 1. So it's a class 1 lever which is a force multiplier. By the way, I hope you all know that a class 1 lever can either behave as a force multiplier or a speed multiplier depending on the position of the fulcrum. If the fulcrum is quite towards the effort, then it is a speed multiplier, and if it is towards the load, then it becomes a force multiplier. And if it is right in the middle like a seesaw, in that case its MA will be 1, and as a consequence it will neither be a force multiplier nor a speed multiplier. To which class of levers does a crowbar belong? So to which class of levers does a crowbar belong? So we have already discussed that as fulcrum is in the middle for a crowbar, it is a lever of class 1. And finally, name the class of levers which has a mechanical advantage always less than 1. Now, levers which have mechanical advantage always less than 1 is a class 3 lever. And this is so because class 3 levers have effort in the middle. That is, effort is in between the load and the fulcrum, and as a consequence, if I draw the schematic diagram, fulcrum is on one end, load is at the other end, the effort is somewhere in the middle, and effort arm in such a case is always smaller than the load arm. So therefore MA, which is given by the formula effort arm upon load arm, will always be lesser than 1, as effort arm is smaller than the load arm. So in that case, it always turns out to be a speed multiplier.